Well, good morning, guys. I just wanted to run through with you some images that I recently took from a storm front that came through Melbourne, just in my hometown here, just this week. And the reason I wanted to show you this was because many of you may know I don't like stuffing around too much in Lightroom or Photoshop. I like to just apply very quick, easy tools to my images so that I can get the best possible result. And in this particular case, a big storm front came across the bay, which is just near my place here, and it was 100-kilometre-hour winds. This amazing storm front came through. Now, when I captured it in camera, I really didn't envisage it looking this way. It looks quite flat and lacking contrast. And as you can see here by the histogram up in the top right here, you'll see that there isn't a lot of contrast in it whatsoever. The histogram's pretty much stuck to the middle, mid-grey, which is what the image you can see here is. But I really wanted it to be really dark and moody and menacing, exactly how I saw it. Now, when I've captured this image, I've probably underexposed it a little. I really should have pushed it further to the right to be able to capture as much data as possible. I've captured it at thousandths of a second at f5.6 at ISO 200. Now, I was using an 80 to 200mm lens. I obviously fixed the lens at 120mm because I actually put together a pano, and that's the other images you can see here. I'm going to go through that in a sec. And kept the exposure the same, and the wind or the waves were going right to left, so I started the pano on the right and moved to left. But I want to go through that in a sec. Just have a look at this picture and let's see how I worked it. So this is what I started out with, and this is what I ended up with, simply out of that same image. This is the same image, this is the before, and this is the after. So I was really happy with the result I got just from doing a few quick things, so I just wanted to show you how I do that now. So go into the develop module, and first things first, I'm looking at this image and I'm saying to myself, it's a bit too much sort of space at the top here. What I was attracted to was obviously in the center here with all of these amazing shapes of these clouds here, right? Now, I've shot this a little bit wider than I probably should to allow myself to crop if need be. Captured this nice little bird up the top here, but unfortunately he's going to go. So when I come to photograph an image and when I come to then process it in Lightroom, I'm really looking at where's the wow factor, where is it inside the image here that really attracted my attention in the first place. And of course it was these clouds. So having this at the top is only just diluting the impact of what is below. Okay, so let's crop that out. The other thing is too here that these waves are a bit messy here in the bottom right and across the bottom here. This wave of white line across here almost looks like it shouldn't be there. It's just pulling my eye away. So again, I'm just going to crop this right up to here just to have a little bit more simplicity in what I'm shooting there. Okay, so now that I've done this crop, let's talk about, let's work on, creating some magic here, and in particular adding some contrast to this picture here because really it's quite flat. So just go to the basic, in the develop module, just go to the basic template here. And let's just pull our contrast way across to the right here and see what we get. Now, it's starting to get there. It's starting to look, like something. However, let's have a look. However, it's not going back to front. Let's do this. It's not what we want. Let's go this. Where am I? Am I in the right picture? Yeah, I'm in the right picture. Let's do this. Back to develop. Okay, it's looking a little bit dark still. So let's brighten it up a bit. But by the same token, that's probably made it too bright for my liking. In other words, the waves are pretty much white. If we took this histogram all the way to the right here, we'd have white in here. But the sky's just way too bright for my liking. I want it to be more dark and menacing than that. So I've clicked on the gradient tool here. I've just taken the exposure down a little. Let's take it down about a stop. I'm going to draw a gradient in across this whole sky. Now, if I started from the top, I'd run out of space. You see here, I'm running out of space here to pull this gradient down any further because my cursor's disappearing out of the bottom of the frame. And yet, the effect of the gradient is only up to the middle section here, only up to here, okay? So really haven't got it down all the way to the bottom, okay? So if we just press escape, I'll just click on that gradient again and press delete, that gets rid of it. If I start the gradient from about halfway down here, I then have the space to be able to pull it all the way to the bottom. If I keep my finger on the shift key, it keeps the line nice and straight. And there we have our gradient over the top. Looking quite dark, but that's okay. Let's increase the contrast on that gradient. Let's up the exposure a little. The other thing I want to do there, yeah, it's starting to get dark and moody, but clarity will increase localized contrast and therefore just really make this image pop. Of course, clarity isn't sharpening pixels. Many of you probably use it in order to have things appear sharper. All clarity does is it just increases localized contrast. And in this particular case, look at what it's doing. It's really making this image pop, which is fantastic. So as you can see, we started there just by darkening exposure a little bit, increasing the contrast, but to really make it pop, I'm going to bring it across here to the right. So there's the clarity, okay? If I close that, I'm somewhat getting to where I want to be, but still, I think it's too bright up in here. Where I really want my eye to be is in the middle here and in through this section here where all the rain's coming out of the storm. So I'm going to use another gradient just to draw it over the top, okay? Keep my finger in the shift key, that'll keep that gradient nice and straight. And I'm going to just brighten that a little more. So I'm drawing one gradient over the other, and you see how that's just going to hold our eye in the frame. And what that's really done is brought out some gorgeous detail or some gorgeous light coming through the tops of the clouds here, which I couldn't see before. If I go back to that gradient, just click on that dot in the middle in order to just work on this gradient again. I might just try increasing the contrast a little. No, that's a bit too dark. Clarity, not really doing much there. I'm pretty happy with what I've done in the first place. Something else I want to do here is the sky is looking really good. And again, I might increase the contrast a little more just overall in the image. That's looking good. Maybe add a bit of black, a little bit of mood. So really what I'm trying to do is like push and pull this histogram. You see what I'm doing? If I'm increasing the exposure and increasing the contrast, I'm stretching that histogram. I'm making the whites brighter and I'm making the blacks darker by bringing this over here, you see? Now I'm dragging this black slider down to the right, I'm making the blacks blacker, okay? So that's starting to look more what I want with the clouds. But what I'm not happy with is this water, okay? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna brighten that. Now I could get the adjustment brush, which is this one here, and I could draw in all of this as a mask and then brighten it, but that's really messy and ununiform. So what I'm going to do is just do the opposite of what we did at the top and draw a gradient from the bottom, finger on the shift key, okay, just to keep it nice and straight. Draw it up to about there where the waterline is, but rather than darkening it, I'm of course going to lighten it. And I've lightened it that way, but I also want to increase the contrast. I don't want it to be flat. Just by increasing the exposure, that's only working on the mid-tones. I want to increase the contrast and have that be a little more punchy there. And also increase the saturation a little. So what I've done is I've increased the exposure to brighten it, but then it looked a little flat, so I've increased the contrast to make the blacks blacker, the whites whiter. But in doing so, I was just blowing out a few of the white highlights here in the waves. So I've just actually used the highlights tool and dragged that down to the left, the highlight slider, just to bring the detail back into the highlights. But then I just went, a little bit more punch there, a little bit more color, increase the saturation. Now that's just on this gradient alone, just this gradient down here on the water. I'm making all those effects, okay? Now when I click done on that, look where we're at now. We've got this image that is really starting to sing, okay? So let's have a look at where we started and where we've ended up. If we come down here to our history, again, I'm in the develop module. If we go here to the start, this is the image that we started off with just here, okay? And this is what we've ended up with just here. Now I'll go back to where we started and we had it cropped. So that's the cropped version, the before, and this is the after. All by doing just, look what I've done. I've done an overall exposure and contrast. I've added a couple of gradients to the sky and I've added a gradient to the bottom in order to have that water sing. So pretty much got the image that I want. If I just wanted to add a little bit more something, I could go down here to effects and add a vinaigrette or a vignette as I call it. And that's just going to draw our eye a little more into the center. Okay, it's making it quite dark and moody there. Probably darker than I'd like, so I can just again go up here and just increase the exposure on the overall image. So what I've done is I've drawn in vignette there just to draw our eye into the center of the frame. It's made the outsides quite dark, so I increased the exposure there. And it's also made that sky quite dark as well, so I could then go back to that gradient and increase that. Look, I can just fiddle all day, but I don't like doing that. I just like doing something that's quick and easy. And that is how I transferred, or transformed, I should say, this image from looking quite bland and boring into something that I think is quite sexy. There we go. I hope you liked it.